So if you look towards the end of the Parsha, where we're talking about yesterday, where the Jewish people go through the kingdom of Edom. Does everybody have a chumash? Pass out the chumash and make sure everybody has a chumash. So in Pasuk, where is it? Okay, on page 850. On page 850. So this was yesterday. We finished the snakes. Right? They were with the snakes, and then it says like this. They go to look 5 lines from the bottom on 850. 5 lines on the bottom. So here the Torah goes and tells us tells an interesting little incident. It says, Misham Nasa'u, see where I am, 6 lines to the bottom, last 2 words. Misham Nasa'u, they traveled from there, Vayachanu benachal Zored. They camp in a place called Nachal Zored. Misham Nasa'u, Vayachanu me'ever Arnon asher bamidbar hayotze migvul ha'amori. They passed through a place called Arnon on the border of the Amorites. Ki Arnon givul Moav bein Moav uvein ha'amori. Arnon is the border between Moav and the Amoris. And then the Torah says something very cryptic, and we're going to have to see the Rashi here. Al ken ye amar b'sefer melchamos Hashem. Therefore, it is written in the, how does he translate it? The book of the wars of Hashem. Es vahev b'sufa ves nechalim Arnon. This is almost an incomprehensible statement. It says the gift of the sea of reeds and the rivers of Amnon. What Arnon? What does that mean? And then it says, Ve'eshed ha'necholim asher l'shev azor, the outpouring of the rivers. I'm just reading the Art School translation. It's very poetic. V'nishan ligvul Moav. Now, if you take a look at Rashi here, Rashi tells us a story. It's the left column of Rashi. If you find it, please show the person next to you. And Rashi says, Ve'eshed ha'necholim. It's about 12 lines up in the Rashi. If you find it, please show the person next to you. It says, what is Ve'eshed ha'necholim? Says Rashi. Everybody see that? Everybody see where that is in the Rashi? Ve'eshed ha'necholim. Targum shel shefech eshed. The translation of shefech is eshed. Shefech ha'necholim. Shenishpach sham dam ha'amorim. That's where the blood of the Amoris was spilled. Shehayu nechbayim sham. They were hiding there. What does that mean? Says Rashi. Lefi shehayu. Now again, Rashi is quoting the Medrash. Rashi tells us a story. Lefi shehayu haharim gevohib. The mountains were high. V'nachal, the valley, amok, v'kotzer. The valley was very deep and narrow. Narrow. V'haharim smuchim zelazeh. The mountains were very close to each other. I mean, picture 2 mountains which are really close to each other, but you got a deep valley between them. Adam omed al har mizeh, a man could stand on one mountain, umedaber im chavero bahar mizeh, and he speak with his friend on the other mountain. Ve'haderech over b'soch hanachal, and the path went through the valley. Amru Amorim, so the Amorim had a plan. Kisheyikansu, could we turn on the air, please? Kisheyikansu Yisrael l'soch hanachal, when the Jewish people, this was the plan of the Amorites, when the Jewish people go through the valley, Lavor Neitzei mina me'oros shebar will come out of the caves in the mountains. Shelamala mehem, that means the Amoris were hiding in these caves in the mountains that overlook the valley. V'nahargem b'chitzim v'avnei b'listeros. We'll kill them with arrows and with all sorts of stones, what are catapult stones. V'hayu osam nikoyim b'har shel tzad Moav. On the side of the valley, which was the Moabite property, you had these caves. Ubahar shel tzad ha'amorim, on the side of the other side of the Amori side, hayu kineged osam nekoim kibin karnos v'shodayim boltim lachutz. There were protrusions. So you got one mountain, they're hiding in the caves. The other mountain has these protrusions. And what they were going to do was come out of these caves and attack the Jewish people who are down in the valley. Kevan shebo Yisrael lavor, when the Jewish people were going to cross, nizdazea hahar shel eretz Yisrael, the mountain moved, keshivcha hayotzes lahakbil penei gevirta, like a maidservant who's going out to greet her master, V'niskarev l'tzad har shel Moav, and it went near the mountain of Moab. It pressed against it. V'nichnesu osan hashadayim l'soch osan nekoim v'hargu. So the protrusions from one mountain crushed the Amoris who were in the caves in the other mountain. They fit right into the caves. So they were hiding in the caves, and the mountains closed in on them, and it crushed them inside. I hate when that happens. It crushed them. It crushed the Amoris who were in those caves. Now, the problem is, how did anybody know about this? Where did anybody find out? So look on the next page. On 852 it says, Umisham be'era, hiya be'era b'sher amar Hashem l'Moshe esofa esavet nelamayim. And from there they went to Be'era. Take a look at the top Rashi. Umisham be'era, misham ba ha'eshed el ha'be'er. The flow came down to the mountain. Ketzad. What does that mean? Amar HaKodesh Baruch Hu, top line, right column. Mi modia lebonai hanisim halalu. Who's going to tell my children these miracles that took place? The Jewish people already went past there. They weren't there yet. I'm not sure exactly where they were. They didn't see the results. So how do they know what happened? That the Amoris got crushed in the very caves that they're waiting to ambush them with. V'amashal omer, there's an old saying that says, Nasata pas latinok, if you give bread to a child, hodia le'imo, let the mother know what gift you gave him. I got to let the Jewish people know. So what happened? La'achar she'avru, after they passed, chazru aharim limkomam. After the Jewish people passed through, the mountains went back to their place. In other words, apparently the mountains closed in at the top, and the Jewish people walked through in the valley. Okay, mountains closing for the Jewish people is no big deal. You know, they've seen a mountain dangling over their head at Har Sinai. So for them, it's not a big deal, but they don't know what's happened in the caves on top of the mountains. So what happened? Ve'habe'er yorda l'socha nachal. The Be'er, the well of Miriam, went into the valley. Vehel samisham dam harugim. It brought out the blood of the victims who were killed. Vizro'os ve'ivarim, and all sorts of arms and limbs. Umolichan saviv hamachane. And they took the bear where the well made a trip around the camp with blood and limbs and, what do you call it? The Yisrael ra'u v'amru shir. The Jewish people saw that, then they sang a Shera, which is the Torah that goes on and says the Shera, the song that they sang. Because apparently when they saw limbs and blood and all these things, they realized, oh yeah, those are the old Amori limbs, and they sang a Shera. So that was the miracle. That was the miracle that happened. Now, there is another opinion here, and I want to show you this. Take a look at the back page, one page back again. It says, Al Kain, 3 lines from the bottom. Al Kain ye amar b'sefer melchamos Hashem, es vahev b'sufa. Now look how the ArtScroll translates it. It said in the books of Hashem, the gift of this, how's he translate it?
The Sea of Reeds.
The Sea of Reeds and the rivers of Ammon. But how does he translate es vahev b'sufa? The Ammon is the border of Moab and right? Therefore, it is said in the book of the words, the gift. Oh, it's Vahev B'sufa, the gift of the Sea of Reeds and the rivers of Ammon. Now, the Medrash says that there were actually 2 Mitzorayim, 2 lepers. People had leprosy. Now, when they had leprosy, what happened to them? Where did he go with leprosy? He had to leave the Jewish camp. So they were trailing behind. There were 2 lepers, and they were trailing behind the whole camp. And the names of these lepers were Vahev, Es, and Vahev. Es and Vahev were the names of these lepers. They were outside the camp, 2 men. One guy's name was Es, and the other one's name was Vahev. I don't know which parent named their kid Es. V'yikrei Shema b'Yisrael Es. Right? I had a friend who actually legally changed his name. He added a name. His middle name became The. He took the name The. His name was like Mike. I'm using a different name, but his name. This guy was pretty nut. He was obviously a nut. So let's say his name was Mike Goldberg. He changed his name to Mike the Goldberg. He made the because we had actually nicknamed him because he was really more of a thing than a human. So we used to call him and he actually liked it. And so he went and changed his name legally and made his name Those are the types of people I hung around with. This is a guy who was once in a hotel lobby with this guy in Florida, My family went to Florida. He happened to be there also. So as we're walking through the hotel lobby, he just did a karate somersault right in the middle of the lobby. So and that was one of the more mild things that he did. So there are two guys. One guy's name is S, and one guy's name is Vahav. And they were trailing, and they reported it to the Jewish people what they saw. That's what there's a medrash that says they saw the limbs and the blood and when the mountains went back because they were coming from behind, and they reported to the Jewish people, hey guys, you're not going to believe this, but we just saw a bunch of Amori limbs and blood because they were crushed in the caves. That's what they would have gone. I was intrigued by something. These two guys are lepers. They had saras, and I don't have a source for this. It's only my own thoughts on the subject. But I was intrigued by their names, and I was intrigued by the fact that they are lepers, that they got saras. I'm only offering this as a possibility. I don't have any sources for this. But where does saras usually come from? Lashon hara. And where does Lashon Hara come from? Why does a person speak Lashon Hara? Usually it's because you're a selfish person, you're thinking about yourself, you resent other people, and you look down at other people. Many different causes for Lashon Hara. The word S in Hebrew, it's a funny name to give somebody. You know what? In English we don't have S. What is S? When is S? Ani rotzeh et zeh. It's a specific thing. As opposed to, you could also say Ani rotzeh zeh. It's Ani rotzeh et zeh. That means a person with the name S is likely to be a person who is very, very focused on what he wants. I want this and I want this. Et zeh, ve'et zeh, ve'et zeh. I want this. And a person who's focused on what he wants is likely to be a selfish person. What does the word have in Hebrew? What does the word have mean? It's actually, the word have means give me. It's also a selfish person. So it could be that S, Vahav were their names. But it means when the Medrash is telling you that it wasn't just their names, it was their tendencies. That's what caused them to have leprosy, to have tsaras. Because it's a type of person who gets tsaras. If you're focused on yourself, you're focused on your needs, you're only focused on what you want, that's the type of person who's likely to end with tsaras, number one. Number two, the Gemara says that this alludes to two people studying Torah. Now, do you ever watch two guys learning Torah, two guys in the base medrash who are learning and really going at it, right? They look like they're going to come to blows. All you need is to put ropes around them and go 15 rounds. That's what the guy, what are you talking about? That's not the pshat. It's called Milchamta Shel Torah. It's called the battle of Torah. That's how we learn Torah. You just have to be careful that doesn't become personal. It's never personal. I just think that you're an absolute nitwit for saying that, right? But not personal, right? That doesn't make any. That's not what Tosos is saying. What are you talking about? But what? And you get passionate about it. So the Gemara says, a father and a son, and a Rebbe and a Talmud, over the Gemara they become enemies, but they walk away as vahev besufa. Vahev comes from the Hebrew word ahava, love. Bisufa is from the word sof, at the end. The Gemara says this alludes to the way people learn Torah. Over the Gemara, all's fair in love and Gemara, right? All friendships end over the Gemara, right? We're going to get shot, and I don't care who you are, what you are. We're going to get shot if it means we're going to go back and forth. But when we walk away from the learning, then the people walk away from the learning with there's complete love and friendship between them. Because we have one goal. The goal is to get to the truth of the Torah. That's all. It has nothing to do with nothing personal. I was once, years ago, I was in the base medrash, two guys were learning. So I hear one of the guys says they're talking over the Gemara, and one of the guys says to the other guy, that's a really stupid idea. The other guy says, don't call my idea stupid. He says, you watch your mouth. So I kind of sidled over to their table, and I said, guys, whatever else this isn't a machlokas l'shem shemayim. This has gotten a little too personal. If you're going to slug somebody in a base medrash, it's getting too personal. So there's what's called the milchamta, the battle of Torah, because that's how we study Torah. We study Torah because we're trying to get to the truth. We're trying to get to, but it's never personal. Should never be personal. That's the chavrusa system. The whole idea of learning with the chavrusa is if you have two what we'll call intelligent people, right? Daniel, that's what we call them in Shir. You have two intelligent people sitting over a piece of Gemara. If your idea makes sense, you should be able to convince the other intelligent person across the table from you. If it's making sense, he should agree that it makes sense. And until he agrees it makes sense, then it could be you're not making sense. And the fact that you're getting frustrated and flustered is generally because you yourself don't understand. But a guy says, I understand it, but I can't explain it, means you don't understand it. If you understand it, you can explain it. And if you can't explain it, then it's not clear to you. And my Rosh Kolo used to say, it should be, if you could explain, the Brisker Rav said, you could explain anything, even to a child, if it's explained well. You could theoretically explain to a child how a jet engine works. Okay, not a 3-year-old, but a 7-year-old, you could explain how a if you could get him to sit long enough, and you have it worked out clearly in your mind, then you should be able to explain it to somebody else. And if you can't explain it, it means you don't really have absolute clarity on it. That's why you're getting flustered. And I know that when I'm trying to explain a piece of Gemara and the guys aren't understanding it, it's because I don't understand it. And I'm not explaining it well, because if I really understood it, I'd be able to explain it well. And if I'm not explaining it well, that means it's my fault, it's not the guy's fault. But I take it out on the guys because I'm not going to blame myself, right? Obviously, the best defense is a good offense, right? So you may as well blame somebody else. But at the end of the day, if I ever get flustered and frustrated, that just means husbands in marriage, you should know, when a husband starts raising his voice, that means his wife's generally got him nailed, right? When a father says to a kid, I don't want to hear one more word, you're going up there, that means the father's nailed also. And the father says to the kid, I don't want you gambling. He says, yeah, but Dad, you're always gambling. Yeah, one more word and you go, that means he's, nailed. He just nailed him. That's the best response for fathers is, well, one more word. That means that you got him. Whether you should get him or not is a different issue. But when a person gets defensive, that means you generally know you're wrong. Okay? That's it. Yeah, that's what we're getting.
Why is Hashem using Lashon Hara next to go spread the word of his miracles?
That's a good question. Why? I don't know. Why do they have the merit to tell the Jewish people if they're the guys who are outside the camp? Could be that at the point
that they're lying and saying.
It could be that at the point that they're rejoining the camp, that means they've done tshuva. Because they only rejoin the camp if they've done tshuva. Otherwise, they'd still be behind the camp. So it could be they've done tshuva, and that's their merit when they do tshuva. Okay, now take a look at the next. Take a look at the next page on page 852. And there's another idea, very very fascinating idea here.
I have one more question.
Let's go on. Oz Yashir Yisrael Sashir Azlos Ali Be'er Enula. So the Jewish people sang a Shera, like they said when they crossed the Yarden. There's a what do you call it? There's the Shira Sayam we say every morning as Yashir. So they spontaneously sing a Shira in tribute to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the miracles that He's done. And he says like the Be'er Chafaru Asarim, the well that was dug by the officials. Karua Nadivea Am B'Mechokek B'Mishanosam. How does he translate it? It was done, excavated through a lawgiver with their staffs. And then it says, Umimidbar Matana. And from the desert to a place called Matana, Uminatana Nachaliel. Now the word Matana obviously means what? What's a Matana in Hebrew? A present. So, the Gemara says about this expression, now listen carefully. When you learn Torah, it's not like learning physics. Does it ever happen to you? You learn the Gemara, and you learn it again, and you learn it again, you learn it 3-4 times, and you still don't understand it. And then the 5th time, all of a sudden, click, the coin drops, right? Like trying to figure out how you make calculations of paying for a saw on a field 60 times the size, right? You make a calculation, and I don't understand. I don't understand. Ding! The bell goes off. Now, what we think is that, well, I thought about it enough, and eventually my mind made it clear to me. That's not what's happening in Torah. In Torah, when you learn it enough and you work at it, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you a gift. What's the gift? The gift of understanding. But you have to earn the gift. You have to earn the gift by working at it. Physics, there's only one thing. It's your brain in that book. And if you had any brains, you wouldn't be involved in that book at all. But if it's your brain versus that book, right? So it's you in physics, and you got to sit. And how do you study physics? In college? How do you study? You go into a quiet library, and try to get no distractions, and it's only you and the subject matter. Where do we study Torah? Where's the best place to study Torah? In a noisy base medrash. I know people I can't study on my own. I got to have that background noise of a base medrash, right? That makes absolutely no sense. And when studying for a test or studying physics or what do you call engineering, you close yourself into a quiet room and you think, because it's a completely different. There it's pure brains. Either you got the brains or you don't. In Torah, you have to earn it with not only your trying to understand the subject matter, it has to do with your character, refinement of character, because Torah is not like anything else. If you help people and you're a good person, you absorb Torah better. Why? What's one thing got to do with the other? Because it's not only a intellectual pursuit. Says the Gemara, if a person makes himself like a midbar, if you make yourself like a desert, what's the nature of a desert? Anybody who wants comes walking through. Anybody who wants goes stomping through a desert. If a person makes himself like a desert, where he allows people, he helps people, he becomes selfless to help other people, and then he gets the Torah, midbar matana. The Torah is given to him as a gift. If a person, obviously you got to learn Torah. If you don't learn Torah at all, you're not going to get it as a gift. But if you study Torah, and you're also the type of person, somebody weaker than you asks you to study Torah with him, to help him out. And you're kind, somebody needs help, somebody needs a ride, somebody needs help with something. And you make yourself like a midbar, where you're hefker. You allow people need you, and you make yourself accessible to people. Then you're going to get Torah as a gift. You're going to get absorbed a lot more Torah than you really are by rights, by rights that you have any, that you're really intellectually on the level of. But you'll absorb Torah because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ultimately it's a gift. So I'll tell you an unbelievable story. An unbelievable story. Did you ever hear of the Stei Chemed? The Stei Chemed was a man named Rav Chizkiyahu Medini. He lived around the turn of the century, around the late 1800s, early 1900s. I forgot which country. One of the eastern countries. He wrote what is almost an encyclopedia on Shas called the Stei Chemed. Just an absolute monumental work that one man wrote without any sort of Google. No Googling and no nothing. He just wrote an encyclopedia on basically the entire Torah, because he himself was a walking encyclopedia. So they asked Rav Chizkiyahu Medini how he got to that level. So what happened was, when in his country, I forget where he was living, whether it was in Syria or in Iraq, I forget where he was living. But there was a very wealthy man who supported a kollel. And he was one of the young men who learned in this kollel. And he was he learned day and night. He just learned from morning to night. He got very gifted in his ability to sit, which is certainly a prerequisite for learning Torah. But he was very, very gifted, Rav Chizkiyahu Medini. And he learned in this kollel. There was a man in town who was very resentful of him. He didn't like the fact that Chizkiyahu Medini was that this wealthy man took kindly to him, and he supported him in the kollel. For some reason, he had it in for him. There was an Arab woman who used to come into this kollel to clean up. She was the cleaning lady. So this guy goes to this Arab woman, and he pays her money. He says, I want you to blacken his name. And he was always the first guy in and the last guy out, Rav Chizkiyahu, the Stei Chemed Rav Chizkiyahu Medini. So one morning he comes into the shul, and she's there waiting for him, and as soon as he walks in, she runs out into the street yelling that he assaulted her, and she spreads a story about him. So people are saying, oh, I guess he's not what he's cracked up to be, and everybody was like, the only one who didn't believe her was the guy who supported him, the wealthy man who supported him, and when he heard the story, he knew that Chizkiyahu Medini wouldn't have done anything like that, and he immediately fired this Arab lady. He dismissed her. In the meantime, Chizkiyahu Medini, everybody was talking, making noise, so he left town, and he went to a shul in a nearby town, and he sat and learned in the shul. And then a couple of weeks later, the door of the shul opens up, where he's learning by himself in this other town, and this Arab lady walks in. And she says, you know what happened, and we both know that nothing happened, but because of what I did, the wealthy man, he fired me, and now I don't have any money. The money that I was paid to spread the story, I've run out of that money. And now I don't have any money. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to intervene on my behalf with the wealthy man and rehire me for the shul. He goes, oh. She goes, yeah, I understand that you're a little bit upset, and I'll make a deal with you. He'll rehire me. If you intervene, he'll rehire me, and then I will get up and make a public announcement that I made up the whole story and your name is clean. So Chizkiah Medini said he thought to himself, look, there's already been a Chil Hashem. What's the Chil Hashem? The Chil Hashem is that people think he did what he did. A desecration of Hashem's name, people think he did what he did. So what's going to happen now? She's going to get up in public, and she's going to make an announcement that she was lying, and then everybody else is going to see that really what happened was that there was another Jew who hired her to blacken his name, which is going to be a bigger Chil Hashem. So he said to her, listen, I'll intervene on your behalf on one condition. I'll talk to the wealthy man, one condition, that you never breathe a word of this to anybody ever. You don't tell anybody that you made up the story, and I'll intervene on your behalf. She didn't care as long as she got a job back. So he went and intervened. He spoke to the wealthy. He said, you should rehire the Arab lady, and he never told anybody about it. And he said that at that moment that he was concerned for God's honor, he said later, I felt that my head opened up and that I received the Torah as a gift. That matana, he got the matana, he got a gift. Why? Because he was concerned. So when it comes to mastery of Torah, I mean, if you looked at Reb Chaim Kanievsky, I don't know if did any of you ever get to go to Reb Chaim Kanievsky? Did you ever go there? If you were there, you saw the lines of people there? Yeah. You know what it took you to be, people think, oh, look at Reb Chaim Kanievsky, wow, Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Do you know the man didn't have a minute to himself? And people were waiting on him and sitting on him, and he got all sorts of people. Some of them were even normal, right? Many not, you know. And he had people coming in telling him that Mashiach, that they're Eliyahu, Novi, and these are, you know, those are the normal ones. And then he, what do you call it? And he didn't have a minute to himself from morning to night. He made himself like a midbar. Of course, he studied Torah day and night also. But the Torah that he studied and the amount that he knew and the way he knew it, that's ultimately a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because you make yourself into a midbar. Okay. Now, take a look at the next section. Because now we're going to get to two very intriguing people. First of all, the Jewish people take on a man named Sichon. And Sichon doesn't want to let them pass through his land. So the Jewish people conquer Sichon. And then they get to somebody even more intriguing. If you take a look at 854, 7 lines to the bottom. And this is one of the most enigmatic personalities that we find in the Torah. Vayifnu vayalu derech ha-Bashan. The Jewish people go up through the Bashan. So this is up there in the north. Vayetze og melech ha-Bashan likrosam hu v'chol amo la milchama edrehi. Og melech ha-Bashan goes to battle them. He and his own nation, they go to war in Edrei, a place called Edrei. Now, take a look back for a second on the previous page. And what is the kingdom of Sichon? Sorry, it's the top of this page. Vayikach, top of this page. This is the land of Sichon. Vayikach Yisrael es kol ha'orim ha'ele. Vayeshev, they capture all these cities. Vayeshev Yisrael b'chol orei ha'amori b'cheshbon u'v'chol b'nosea. They live in a place called, Sichon was in a place called Cheshbon. What is Cheshbon, gentlemen?
Check. Like,
Cheshbon is a total, well, what modern Hebrew they use is taseli Cheshbon. Make my, my bill, right? Cheshbon is also used as math. But what else is Cheshbon? Cheshbon is a calculation. Ki Cheshbon ir Sichon melech ha'amorihi. Cheshbon is the city of Sichon, third line. V'hu nilcham b'melech Moav harishon vayikach es kol artzo miyodo ad Arnon. Now here you have an unbelievable occurrence. The Jewish people were told by God, who are they not allowed to fight against? This people of Moab. They can't fight Moab and conquer Moab. So what happens? You're not allowed to attack Moab. Why? Because the Moabites are from Lot and they're your brothers. Right? Lot is the brother of, he's the nephew of Avram Avinu. So Sichon goes and he conquers a place called Moab. And then what do the Jewish people do? Then the Jewish people could go and fight and conquer it. So we get the land of Moab. Why? Because the limitation was not to fight Moab. But once Sichon conquers Moab, so the Jewish people could go fight Sichon. So they conquer Moab, and they conquer Cheshbon, they conquer all these things. And then the Torah says, Al Kein Yomru HaMoshlim, the parable sayers. How does he translate it? What does he say it? How does the Artzo translate? The poets. Bo cheshbon. Come make a calculation. Tibana v'sikonin ir cheshbon. Ir sichon. So the Gemara says, what does that bo cheshbon mean? So bo cheshbon literally means come to the city of Cheshbon. I'm not sure where that is. But come to the city of Cheshbon. But the Gemara says bo cheshbon is live with a calculation. Make a calculation, the loss of a mitzvah versus the gain of doing an avera. Right? How much is the mitzvah worth and how much do you lose by not doing the mitzvah? How much is an avera worth and how much do you lose by doing an avera? Live with a cheshbon. That means that a person has to live with a calculation. So a person has a temptation. What I really should be doing is I should be going to a shir, I should put on tefillin, I should daven, and the alternative is because I've got the opportunity to do something inappropriate. Well, how long does the pleasure of something inappropriate last? It's not very long. The loss, a person has to live with a constant calculation. What is my gain and what is my loss? What do they call it in business? They call it you're making pros and cons. What's that?
Cost benefit.
Cost benefit. Yeah, exactly. What's my cost benefit over here? Right? Is it worth it? Is it really worth it? That a person is willing to do it. If a person stops and thinks to himself, okay, here's a pleasure, here's a temptation. How long is that going to last? Versus what I would be gaining eternally by doing the mitzvah. That's how a person's supposed to live with that calculation. Now, what I want you to pay attention to is, what does the word cheshbon mean? The word cheshbon means living with a calculation. Now, skip back down to Og. Vayetze Og melech haboshan likrosam hu v'chol amola milchama edrei. What is an edrei in Aramaic? Do you know what edrei means? It means an arm. It means an arm. So there are two kings. These are the final two kings that they kill before they go into Eretz Yisrael, their final conquest. One is the conquest of the mind, and one is the conquest of the arm. The arm always represents action. That means it's the last two reminders that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to give the Jewish people, that a Jew has to live with thought and a Jew has to live with action. And we overcome the forces of thought and the negative forces of thought and the negative forces of action. Now, this guy, Og, is remarkable. Where's the first time, anybody know where's the first time we come across Og? Where? Noah's Ark, right? The Gemara says, how did Og survive the flood? How did he survive the flood? He was a giant. I'll tell you how big he was in a second. How did he survive the flood? They made a little window for him, and he managed to get his face in the window. He kept his face on the ark so he could breathe ark instead of breathing water. I mean, the ark didn't smell that great either. He had a lot of animals there, but that's better than getting drowned. So Og survives that. Then where else do we find Og? He is the messenger who comes back to tell Avram Avinu that Lot has been captured by the four kings. And what was his plan when he did that? What did he want to happen? He wanted Avram Avinu to go to war and die so he can marry Sarah, who was beautiful. Now, the Gemara says that Og, the Gemara in Brachos says that Og picked up a mountain and he was going to drop it on the entire Jewish people. It's Gemara in Brachos. He's going to drop this mountain on the Jewish people. So Moshe Rabbeinu took a hatchet. Moshe Rabbeinu was 10 amos tall. He took a 10 amo hatchet, and he jumped 10 amos, and he smashed Og in the ankle. So I once made a calculation. If the ankle is 30 amos off the floor, off the ground, Og was approximately 4/5 of a mile tall, which creates all sorts of logistic problems. Like, where did he get his suits? They always talk about athletes. Basketball players always had trouble in hotels sleeping on the beds because the beds were too short for them. You got 1,000,001 issues over here. So Og was a giant, and the Gemara is really trying to communicate that Moshe Rabbeinu was intimidated by Og because he felt Og has that merit. Og has a certain merit, the merit of having come to Avram Avinu and telling Avram Avinu about Lot being captured. Moshe Rabbeinu was nervous about Og's merit. Now, if you make a calculation, if Og, the Medrash says that he was around at the time of Noah's Ark, and they only get killed when the Jewish people go into the land of Israel. So how old was he? How old was Og? Old. Yeah, he was old. Thank you very much. Yeah. How old? I'm not sure. He was hundreds and hundreds of years old. Now listen to this incredible Medrash. What did he do to merit such long life? And why was he eventually killed by the descendants, by the Jewish people? So the Medrash says, you know why he merited such long life? He went to Avram and Sarah, and he said to Avram and Sarah, the two of you are beautiful like a tree alongside a brook. You ever see these pictures? They have these, you ever see these birthday cards, these soft focus birthday cards? They always have a picture of like a brook and a tree and a horse. I'm not sure how the horse gets in there, and then it says at the top, thinking of you. Right? I say that, I'm talking about, as opposed to the shticky birthday cards, right? The thinking of you. Hold for a second. They got these soft focus birthday cards, right? Thinking of you. Beautiful. So I don't care what you think of me, as long as there's a check in the card. Don't save the card, just give me the check. Women like that sort of thing, thinking of you. Blah, blah. By me, it's just, open up, nothing in there, keep it. Who's interested? And why did you spend so much money on a card anyway? You could have just added that to the check. But at the end of the day, what did he do? He said to Avram and Sarah, the two of you are beautiful like a tree alongside a brook. For that compliment, he merited long life. How do you like that? For that compliment, he merited long life. One second, just hold it. So then why did he get killed? Because in the next line he said to them, the two of you are beautiful like a tree alongside the brook, but you don't produce fruit. Because Avram and Sarah didn't have children. For that dig, for that shtach, Og was decreed that he's going to be killed by the Jewish people. So, there's a pasuk in Mishlei that says, Mavis v'chayim biyad lashon. Life and death are in the hands of the tongue. That means Og Melech, people always wonder, what can I do to, what can I do? What can a person do to extend their life? Then once there was a guy, 104 years old, I think it was from Sweden. They once asked this guy what he did to live to, how he managed to live to 104 years old. He said he got a lot of exercise and he didn't drink too much. But then again, he didn't drink too little. That's what the guy said. That's why he lived to 104. Og lived long because of the compliment. That means if a person wants to merit long life, a person could live life. You don't have to go compliment. Men aren't like, oh, you look so pretty. But if you encourage people, you build people up instead of tearing people down, and you give people a certain feeling, a good feel about themselves, a person could live long because of that. And one sentence later, he says, but the two of you do not prove for that dig. So it's decreed that he's going to get killed. There's Mavaz v'chaim b'yad lashon. So Og Melech HaBashan comes out to fight the Jewish people, and the Jewish people defeat him, and they defeat Sichon, and then the Torah goes on to the next Parshas Balak. Now what do you want to ask, Ezra?
I'm just wondering, isn't that a line from Tehillim?
What's that? Mavaz v'chaim b'yad lashon? Mishlei.
No, I'm saying the tree by the brook that Asher Ish, Asher Lo Allah,
Look it up and then see if it's the right, if it is what you're thinking of. So V'haya ke'etz shasel al pagei mayim, as opposed to. But then what he said is, you're like beautiful like a tree alongside a brook. Okay, so we just start the next pasuk. Right now gives you, this is all the background going into the next pasuk. Take a look, the first pasuk on the next page. Parshas Balak. Vayar Balak ben Sipor es kol asher asay Yisrael le'amori. Balak ben Sipor sees everything that Yisrael did to these two Amori kings. These Sichon and Og were very, very powerful kings. And I'll leave you with a question for tomorrow. If you notice the pasuk, two psukim ago, two parshas ago, what was the parsha? Korach. And then comes Chukas. And now Parshas Balak. Do you see anything about the names of the parshas that grabs you? Look at those three names. Korach, Chukas, and Balak.
They're all 3 letters.
They're all 3 letters. Good, you're on the right track. I'll give you a little hint. I'll let you know tomorrow. Make sure you should. Yes, what about it?
It's in the 3. It's in the beginning, in the middle, and...
Excellent. Very good, Mayor. See? Korach, the kuf's at the beginning. Chukas is in the middle. Well, that's because he gives of himself to do the videoing, so he gets it as a gift. There you go. That's exactly what we're talking about. Korach is the kuf is in the beginning. Chukas, the kuf is in the middle. And Balak, the kuf is at the end. We'll see tomorrow why that is.